Hello, I'm Carl Stabe, and today I have Jay Acunzo with me. He's a public speaking coach. He helps people really craft and make sure they're getting their message across very clearly. I butchered that opening, but thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And like, as someone who does this kind of thing, like podcasting, speaking, public voice related things for myself and my clients, I'm like, oh, okay, I have a framework for that. Like, tell me about yourself, Carl. And that's where we panic and our heart starts to like, jack the treadmill pace to 11 right away. Coffee chats, hallway breaks in conferences, podcast interviews. Tell me about yourself causes people to break out into hives. So it's funny. It's like I'm on the receiving end of a lot of interactions when I'm like trying to coach my clients through it. So no worries. You didn't butcher that at all.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Uh, just before we started, you talked about, so many different things, and but I realize what's really important is being able to connect with people and being able to build those connections in a way where people want to learn more from you, want to talk more with you. What is that, and how do we do that? And then eventually, what is the system that we can put in place to make that possible?
Yeah, I mean, it's silly to say out loud, but the reason we communicate with somebody, it doesn't matter the format, the reason you're saying something or writing something to other people. It could be internal at an organization, external, one-on-one, one to thousands. Like it literally doesn't matter. If you're using words of some kind to communicate with other people of some kind for some kind of reason, there's really one overriding objective that a lot of us lose sight of, which is make me care. Like, can you open your mouth? Can you write those words? Can you deliver a message and make somebody care? And I obsess over resonance in a world that I think obsesses too much over reach, because to resonate with somebody means you align deeply with them and your message or moment aligns deeply with them such that their thoughts, feelings, even emotions or abilities feel amplified. Right? It's not something that I invented here. This is from the science. Like two frequencies that are aligned, waveforms, sound frequencies, if they are aligned, the science says they are considered resonant, and the first can impart an energy to the second. So that's what we're trying to do when we communicate, is literally impart some kind of energy, which I hope as I say these words that your audience is feeling something in their chest and in their mind that kind of could be described as energy. And we want someone to take an action when we communicate. We want them to care. We need to impart the energy needed to take that action. So that I distill it down to that almost hilariously simple and silly thing to say, which is, can you make them care? Let's start there. If you can't do that, none of the other techniques that you hear about, or objections that people have that influence techniques and none of that matters if you can't first do that initial thing, which is impart the energy needed to act, impart something to them that causes them to care.
Do you have a story that shows us that epitomizes what that looks like?
Yeah, I worked with a woman named Michelle Warner, who is kind of an entrepreneur business owner's secret weapon. So here's somebody who has massive market influence, but she is not social media famous. And those two things to me have never been further apart. And it's important that we start to address that a little bit more. That's a rant for a different day. But Michelle Warner is a business strategist and consultant. So she works with business owners to fix or build their business models, to rewire their marketing strategies. A lot of her clients run agencies or consulting firms, kind of mid-market on down to solopreneurs. And Michelle, for many years, would teach things to her market that you'd expect her to teach. Like an example would be writing a blog post about why you should care more about relationship marketing than traffic marketing if you sell services, right? And to read Michelle's words felt very similar to everybody else. It was like, this is interesting to a degree, it's valuable to a degree, but it's a total commodity. And I think that's a tough realization that we have to face. Just sharing your general expertise or advice on your space or your topic, that's been commodified. It's like, it's not without value, but I can get that value anywhere from dozens of sources that look and sound the same. And now technology platforms can regurgitate that in an instant, right? So for many years, Michelle was doing that playbook. Where things start to get better for someone like Michelle, and this could be true of a corporate executive trying to talk to the board or the team. This could be true of someone like Michelle or me speaking to the market, or you on a podcast, Carl, is Michelle started exploring a premise instead of just talking topics. So her premise, this kind of signature idea or lens through which she sees this topic, is that you should think sequence over strategy to grow a small business. Most people in her shoes are like, I have a simple system, a 5-step plan, a blueprint of some kind. I have like the strategy that my clients benefit from. And she was saying, well, when you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, when you're building a services firm and you're kind of up to that mid-market tier, actually doing things in the right order is more important than knowing all the things to do or even doing all the things particularly well. And so she started exploring this premise, which is that refreshing or insightful reframe on a familiar topic. Like all her peers talk about the same topics, but not like Michelle does. And from there, you start to press everything you would say to the world through that lens, and it resonates more deeply. So when Michelle tells stories in her newsletter, she's talking about like the time a bat got into her house and she panicked and she looked on Google and all the advice was conflicting. And what do I do? And I want the step-by-step blueprint for getting a bat out of the house. And what she really should have done was like take the first right action to lower your panic and help improve your situation. And she jokes that later when she returned the next day, she realized she'd fallen into the same trap that she illuminates to her clients, like seeking a pristine playbook when what she really needed to do was sequence her series of actions, right? So she writes stories about that premise. She has terminology that she's branded and defined to talk to her market about that premise. She's got frameworks and methods and signature sellable offerings. Like Michelle has kind of switched over time from being yet another person on a spreadsheet labeled business consultant that her clients are vetting, and that's a race to the bottom and you can't charge a premium price, to now being the one that's sought out and highly referable because she's giving people this language and this lens through which they can see the topic that she explores, and it aligns all her choices too. So she's able to differentiate. So that's an example of somebody who could be a commodity, could be someone who, again, not without value, but a dime a dozen and everywhere, and made more cheap, I think, by the era of AI. It could look like that for Michelle, but because she shifted how she communicates her expertise, kind of packaging and communicating it to actually resonate, now she's able to charge a premium. She earns, money hand over fist. She takes off every summer, Carl, which makes me so freaking angry because I have little kids and it'd be great to like not have to send them to summer camp or like actually take that 2-week vacation that I always tell myself I'm going to take at some point. And, so like this is not just about cold, hard capitalism gains, although there's that too. It's also Michelle being able to say, given that I have market momentum and influence and it's coming easier for me, how do I want to intentionally design my business and my life? And I just love that for somebody like her.
I love that. And that's such a good story because you're right. Like, I fall into that trap as well. I teach people systems, how to develop these systems, and it usually starts with the customer experience because as people are, I always like to say time to value. You have to get people quickly to that value. How fast can you get them there?
Yeah.
And I think we think like, oh, with AI, this will just speed up the process. But we're emotional beings. The people that are making these decisions aren't doing it because they're like, oh, yeah, you're saying all these things. But back to your point about the energy, there's this lack of energy that comes along with those words that you're saying, the ones you're doing on video or the ones you're writing, whatever it is. And therefore, it's not working or it's not working as well as you hoped. And I think that to me is like, okay, it's a little bit of I got to get better at this myself because I don't do a good enough job of it. Right. Like,
right. Well, it's again, another silly thing to say, like what matters, but what you say and how you say it determine whether anyone cares. Right. And so there's this divide between having competence and achieving greater resonance. And that's the journey I'm obsessed with for my own business. For many years, I worked in-house as a marketing leader. I was head of content at HubSpot, worked in sales at Google, then a tiny startup and a VC firm. So I kind of did a tour of duty, seeing all different angles on tech. And then when I branched out on my own, I did a thing that people kind of look at me funny when I say, like, I became a professional keynote speaker for a time where I was on the road earning from stages. People are like, wait, did you get famous and then speaking happens? It's like, no, you decide to build a design firm, you decide to whatever, start a YouTube channel about Star Wars or singing and find a way to monetize that, you can decide to be a professional keynote speaker. It's not truly about fame. And so I did that for many years. And when you're in that world of like thought leaders and authors, and yeah, there's a lot of fluff and there's a lot of bad actors, as with any space, but the ones who do it right and have staying power and build real businesses and help people in a real way, they know. They're like, I have a bunch of questions. I have a lot of frustration about the status quo of a space or a community. I have to go investigate that stuff and really understand what it is I am trying to say, like to myself first, then out to the market, because I need to package and communicate my expertise, not as like a wall of smarts. Like I can't be an informational expert and achieve much traction these days. I need to turn into what I would call a transformational voice, which means I know how to change people. I know how to get them to see what I see, delivering a message for buy-in. I know how to get them to change the way they think or act about something that they care about, and that helps them, right? And that, of course, brings them closer to me and maybe something I sell. And so that journey from informational expert to transformational voice, it fits very snugly around someone who says, I want to be a keynote speaker. I want to be an author. But more and more, I'm seeing any type of leader needs to step into that role where just knowing things is no longer sufficient. It's get in line. You have advice and you know things. That's fine. But can you get me to care about those things? Can you get me to act on those things? That determines a leader's efficacy, no matter if you're thinking of being a thought leader or an internal corporate leader, or like Michelle, you're a thought leader, but kind of a hidden one who's not public facing on social media, but is referable, right? There's all these permutations when I say leadership. And so in that journey I was on as a keynote speaker, it's like, oh, okay, like I knew I wanted to get off the road, stay at home with my kids more. And when I started developing services for folks, it's like, what can I borrow and steal from that world of the folks who do that stuff right and influence other people and inspire action in them, and translate that for people who are building businesses, sparking movements, running nonprofits. They're the creator or the entrepreneur, the executive. Like I want the good folks with real substance to communicate the way our favorite voices do. And to me, that's a craft. That's a learnable skill. It's not something people are born with.
The word resonance, how you want to go not just from, being an expert to being able to resonate with people.
Yeah,
And it comes back to that energy again, right? And I think when you do that, and this is where I think gets tough, we put ourselves out there, we try things and then they fail. And then we are like, oh, that didn't work. We try something and when we fail. And I think that can be disheartening, right?
yeah,
And I think even to your story about your past client, you're trying these different things. You know that this stuff works, but it's not resonating with people. What does that system look like? Kind of break it down for us of
sure.
like,
Sure.
okay, it's not quite working the way that I hoped it would. And like, even if you're in corporate America and you're like, okay, I got to do these presentations and they
Yeah.
just kind of, it's fallen a little bit flat. How do you break
Yeah.
that down so you're improving it?
Well, I do draw that tension between reach and resonance, right? Between demanding people care and actually inspiring them to care. I draw that delineation in several ways, and one is how you measure it. And so, an easy example is someone like yourself or someone like me, where you might have some front facing public platforms or projects. Reach can be purchased, reach can be bought. I can buy downloads to my show. I can buy emails for my list. I shouldn't, but I could, right? You can buy followers, which further makes the chase for followers on social media nonsensical for serious people. But you can buy reach, or you can advertise and grow your reach. You have to earn resonance, right? For them to actually care, you really got to earn that. And so what are the signals that people care? What are the signals of resonance? And so like a simple example with a podcast, because that's where we're at now, is not downloads, but drop off rate. If they consume the whole episode, you've done your job in resonating. So if I'm sending an email, it's not opens, it's responses or the rate of response. And so what I joke with my clients is that there's like 3 permutations of data, but really they're driven by one metric. The permutations are internal signal. So at first you're communicating what you're trying to say, And do you feel like I'm calmly confident in this? This is actually connecting with me. Oh, that's how I'd say it. I am clear on this. Because if that's not the case, of course, you shouldn't proceed. So that's a bit of a gut check with folks. The second is external signal, but qualitative. And the third is external signal, but quantitative. And the overriding metric you can find throughout all of those. So I came out of the marketing world, Carl, and I joke that if I don't have an acronym for something, you can't be taken seriously as a marketer. So here we go. The acronym is URR, unsolicited response rate. Without asking people to care or attend or respond or do this or do that, without demanding it or gaming it, if I put my ideas in front of people, are they compelled to respond? That's what I need to know to understand if I'm truly resonating. And not all responses are created equal. That's why I say you kind of move through waves of this. Like at first, if I'm sharing a message with the world or other people, I want like votes of support that feel fleeting. You know, a comment here, somebody saying that was a great talk or that was a great presentation, you know, in the boardroom later, like a nicety. That's not as powerful a response as somebody rushing up to you and sharing a story about their life or work because of what you said, right? Because them responding in story requires more time, puts more of their reputation on the line in front of you to say, I'm going to say something pretty deep and vulnerable and important to me back to you because of what you initially said, right? So not all responses are created equal. And I have gone to such great lengths that I've actually created a scoring system for this, but I think there's different permutations of response. And so that's what I want to see from people without the gimmicks or the power plays of demanding things because I'm your boss and I said so, you know, that lousy parenting technique of because I said so, without those things, or publicly without being like, drop a comment on LinkedIn that says want and I'll send you my playbook. Can I merely put in front of somebody else what I'm trying to say and they feel moved to act? If I can get that in small groups or in little signals, now I know I can invest in saying something that way or fleshing that out better to become something that's a larger part of my message, my speech, my platform.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, the system is the trial and error of putting out noise, and I mean noise as in putting out something that you feel people might resonate with,
Yeah.
and then the signal is, are they responding back to you? Are they saying, well, that's interesting. What do you mean by that? Or whatever it is, you're trying
Right.
to solicit some type of response that allows you to understand if it's actually working or not.
Yeah, a very simple example is think of like meeting with your team if you're a corporate leader and you share an idea with the team and you go, what do you think? Like a really powerful signal that you have packaged and deliver that message, that idea, that prompt, whatever, to the room in a way that resonates is they start building up on your thinking with something really productive and not be like, yeah, that sounds good, or like silence, right? So when somebody responds to build on your ideas or to ask really piercing but good questions, those are strong signals that actually you did resonate, even though they're not just wholesale saying, I accept your idea or I accept your question or I accept your message, right? Because there's a lot of false signal in that. You know, as a speaker, you learn the only people coming up to you after a speech have something nice to say. So you can't just look at the people approaching you and be like, I must have killed it because I got three people saying they liked it. Because I'm like, well, what else would they have said? Nobody's going to waltz up to you at a conference and be like, Carl, you know, that was rough, my friend. Also, at minute 5, try doing this instead of that. And that's another reason that like I have a job is because people can't see their label when they're inside the jar. And so people hire people like me for that stuff. But I joke that when you give a presentation of any kind to any type of audience, you get a lot of false signal and you have to eat some humble pie to recognize that you need to continue to sharpen your ideas, sharpen your message, sharpen how you say something. To your point, the trial and error process. Although with my kids, I have a 7 and a 4-year old, and I know you're a dad, I've stopped saying trial and error. Although I believe, and I see it with professionals, we need to embrace that as communicators more. I say it's try and see, not trial and error. Because trial and error goes, crap, this is going to suck. I'm going to mess up a lot. It's going to be painful. Try and see goes, I'm really excited to test this out. I can't wait to see what happens. And I can't wait to learn. It anchors you to the learning. And so one thing that I learned, that was too much of me saying learning, but thanks for coming with me on that. One thing I learned as a professional communicator is The people who develop ideas that are influential and ownable, those are the folks that have gone through more revolutions and more cycles of aerating their thinking publicly or in view of trusted allies, and they've done more improving of those ideas. They didn't have a lightning strike moment. They didn't create the content only once the idea was codified. They used their conversations, their content, their projects to actively improve whatever it is they were trying to understand and explore until it became ownable. So like a lot of people want that resonant idea or that original concept. And I'm like, those things are built. They don't just pop to mind. You have to go and actually shape those over time. So you can pick your focus, but you have to go build clarity. And it's in the building, in the communication process, in the revolutions and reps that we sharpen our message, find what we were trying to say, and say it better.
Okay, so from what I'm understanding, the system is try and see what happens. So kind of putting on that scientist hat and being like, I have this idea, I have this hypothesis. If I talk about this to my clients or I talk about this to the board or whatever it is, then you are setting yourself up to, okay, let's put this out there. And then I guess the system is you have to be willing to honestly look at the feedback coming in.
Yes.
So I'm a big proponent of customer feedback. Like I think everybody who owns a business should be interviewing past clients, should be interviewing. And as a solo entrepreneur, I know you said you have an operations manager, but you're doing a lot of these things on your own. And I think the more that you start to have people under you, and you said you were, head of marketing, you can't be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
And I think having those feedback loops in place help you calibrate. And I think that's what I'm hearing around that system is like, okay, if you have that ability to calibrate, then you can make better decisions on the back end.
Right. This is another vote in favor of public speaking for an executive or a leader of any kind, because you have a lot of well-intentioned moves to get the feedback loop. So when I led teams of content marketers primarily, I felt myself pulled further from the reality of who we were writing to and who we were podcasting for and who we were sharing our ideas with. And it was very much like, I was in meetings all day and I interacted with the team. I was several degrees removed from the market. But then you go to a conference, even if you're not speaking, and all of a sudden reality hits you. All of a sudden you're saying over the coffee break, here's what we do. And you're watching their eyes glaze over. Or you can sense it too. You're like rushing your explanation of your company's value or your service that you offer because you can sense partway through the explanation that you're losing them. You're like, what's going on? I'm articulate. I know our company has traction and we have beloved customers or customers love us. Why can't I say it to them succinctly? Right? It's because you lack practice. You need, but that's good feedback to be like, well, when I said it that way, these three people, they really leaned out and I could tell. And with a speech, you hear this from a lot of comedians. Jerry Seinfeld has famously said he gets 5 minutes to just be Seinfeld on stage. And then he has to deliver because on the stage, it's democratized. You got to earn it every time in the room. Everything that falls away, your title, your fancy pedigree and background, whatever interesting things you feel you bring up there, you better have packaged and communicated that as a linear, seamless experience, as an argument that you're presenting to the world for why they should see things the way you see things in your space. Because if you can't do that, if you can't genuinely deliver something that they both enjoy and benefit from, then you're going to see the wheels come off very quickly. You're going to see the phones come out. A lot of folks, I've heard this from speakers say, why do event organizers not just take phones? Because comedians, they're in the clubs and they ask people to take. I'm like, because if you can't command attention in the room to the point that they're not taking out their phones, that's your fault. That's, when I see phones come out, I'm like, that's my fault. But that's good data because I thought that signature story was killer. And halfway through, I see 4 people in the front row take out their phones. Good.
So what you're saying is you can't take it personal. It's
You
just
can't take
data.
it personal. No. Because if you take it personally, now it's you versus them, and you're not seeing the data. It's the same way with like all these social posts that gamify responses. They ask questions to trigger a response, to trigger the algorithm to say, spread this post. And I'm going, okay, I get the intention behind that, but you're muddying your data because if I end however I would end with that story or teachable post with gusto, but I don't gamify the response. I'm just putting my idea out as best as I can. And then I get no responses or a trickle or disagreement or passionate response or whatever. I'm gathering data because it's not about that one post or moment. It's about, can I take this idea, lifting it out of that project piece or moment and use it everywhere I show up as part of my IP? Like, that's what I want to know, is how to create momentum by turning expertise into IP, that kind of packaged process or packaging process. And folks don't realize, like, when they take a comment personally, when they see people take out their phones and they go, screw them, or when they gamify responses on social media, you're not learning enough about your own thinking to know whether or not you should keep investing in that, repurposing that, or using it, or whether you need to go back to the drawing board and make adjustments. So how in the world do you expect things to come easier, accelerating the sales cycle or creating market momentum?
And I think this is where it gets hard because feelings, ego, right? Like
Totally.
we allow these things to rise us up or knock us down. But when you have the ability to be able to step back, take a beat, and say, really, what's the ultimate goal? And the ultimate goal is to get better. Then it's
Yeah.
not about because maybe they're, and I think this is something to touch on. If you're giving a keynote and you see one person lean back, but you ignore the five people leaning in, then you're also missing out, right? Like you can't get so focused on, and so this is that creating that balance inside yourself that doesn't allow you to get so attached that one guy bringing out his phone, but there's eight people that are, really like, okay, what
Yes.
is he saying? Because you can't reach them all. You
Right.
can't be perfect. And I
Right.
think,
I love that. I have the perfect story that comes to mind for that. So I gave a keynote as a professional keynote, as a paid keynote, you end up in pockets of the working world that you didn't even know existed, or would assume that you have nothing to say to them because, your ideas translate well to that group and they really need to import that thinking. So you think of a keynote speaker in whatever marketing like me, and you're like, oh, Jay shows up at larger marketing expos. Yes. And most of the fees a professional speaker collects are coming from, I've spoken to landscapers and dentists and construction marketers, and there's different pockets of society and work that you find yourself in. One such pocket was in Toronto at a fire safety convention. So this room was full of marketers and communicators who wanted to disseminate facts about fire safety and keep their communities safe, and the fire chiefs and other leadership roles among the fire departments across Canada. And I was giving this speech, and in the front row was like, if I asked my 7-year-old to describe what a firefighter looks like, or maybe a fire chief, she probably would land on this person's description. Larger, kind of barrel-shaped man, gray hair. He had his like full uniform on because I think there was some sort of photo op later, and all of them had gotten decked out for my morning keynote. Not for me. Lord knows not for me. And so he was in full gear, and he had this like bristly, kind of like brush comb like mustache, right? Whole speech, Carl, he's looking at me just straight in the eye with his arms folded over his belly, stone faced. I'm 45 minutes in. I'm about to end, right? 45:02. He still hasn't cracked a smile. 45:03. That's my time. See ya. I get off stage, and he's the one who approaches me first. And he comes rushing up to me and he goes, Jay, I got to say, this organization here, this conference, they've been trotting out people from outside our space year after year after year to give us new ideas. He's like, I always appreciated that, but you actually nailed it. A lot of people don't get, you did. And I was so blown away and so grateful. But in my head, I was like, don't say it to this guy because he can crush you. I didn't say it, but I thought to myself, thank you for that. Someone should have told your face. So to your point, like it is really difficult to gather good data, even with the best of execution and intentions. And so for my money, the people who really sharpen a message, who really develop strong IP, material, internally, externally, you name it, they're the ones willing to your point earlier, not get so precious, not let the ego get in the way, not say I am my ideas, but to say I am exploring these ideas and I want to put this on the board and stand shoulder to shoulder with other folks and poke at it, right? Because I need to do this a ton. Because any one interaction could send me down the wrong rabbit hole. If I had walked away and that guy didn't approach me, I would think I got to re-engineer this whole talk, right? Based on one human being in the front row. Thank God he came up to me and allayed those concerns. But we like to think that genius and brilliance and influence and great ideas, this happens in a lightning strike moment. I'm here to say, no, you bottle that lightning. It is something you can practice, bring out, and do on command. But I do believe you have to do it a lot because you have to want to get it right over time more than you want to be right in this moment in time.
Yeah, yeah, which isn't easy. Okay, I'm gonna shift a little bit. As a leader, you lead a lot of people, with your content, with your coaching. How are you integrating AI into your systems? How do you use it in a day-to-day within your work?
I am pretty queasy and cautious because I don't necessarily trust, but then again, I also don't know enough to know that these companies have good intentions, that these products have been built ethically and well. I'm pretty much of the mind that until they start to credit and compensate the folks whose work you can replicate, I have a lot of questions and concerns. And if you say create this image in the style of this famous illustrator and you name that person, I want the tool to say no problem, click here to pay that illustrator's commission fee. And instead what it says is no problem, here's the image. So I have a lot of concern. And so I have been testing and dabbling in AI, but I'm not a full-throated supporter of it. So I want to make that clear. The way I use it is never to write. I've trained a couple of projects in Claude. One for my ideal one-on-one advisory clientele, these kind of sophisticated, established experts, authors, speakers, entrepreneurs, executives, like the folks that have real traction, real pedigree, deep, deep bench of ideas, lots of substance. And I work with them one-on-one. And I've kind of trained a whole project around who they are and how I serve them. And I've also done the same. I run a cohort program called Design My Signature Talk, which is for people who are about, a couple years behind those folks. It's a group program to build your signature speech and your speaking success systems. And so I have two separate projects, well informed and trained on both of those groups of people and what I offer and how I communicate about those offerings. And then what I do is, as I'm about to write a sales email, as I'm about to write my newsletter, I will go through kind of that feedback loop to gut check what I feel are good ideas to make sure they actually are. So I'll say, hey, here's my newsletter. It is meant for this group of people. Please poke holes or bring up questions that ideal clientele of mine might have that I'm not seeing, right? And so it's this additional layer in addition to my market of keeping me honest, making sure I'm a servant to my audience and not getting too close to my own ideas that I can't see how to be of service, right? So that's one major use case. And then I would bring up a second, which is I have a lot of interactions with the market that I serve. I have prospect calls, I have client calls, I have podcast interviews. There's a mountain of material where I am sharing my ideas. And more importantly, I am being asked a lot of questions. And so I often use the tool to extract questions that I receive, hesitations that people had, ideas that were built on top of my ideas. I'm trying to see the forest because I'm too close I'm bumping up against the trees, right? And so I use the tool for that. And I'm fairly certain both of these are common use cases for AI, but for me, it's helped me reinvest more of my time on what matters most to me and what my calling card is, which is original thinking and storytelling created with human intelligence, not artificial intelligence.
I love that. And I think everybody's different. And I think this is the key part. No one needs to use AI like somebody else. And I
Sure.
like that you're a writer at heart. So you want to keep that fresh. You want to keep that creative element part of you. If you outsource everything to AI, then you stop becoming human, right? You become
Yeah.
more AI in your business than you actually, become, allow yourself to be fully present and human with the people that you work with. But I like that you use it as a way to challenge you. And I think this is where a lot of people don't have that built out in that way. It's like, hey, how does this work, or how, what does this
Yeah.
look like? But what you're saying is you use that, your system is, this is who my people are, challenge me on these ideas and make sure that I'm delivering in the best way possible for them.
Yeah, it really, I'm taking so many of my cues, sometimes overtly and sometimes in this case implicitly, like inspired by stand-up comics, where I spend way more time learning about how comics operate and hearing them talk about their craft than I do fellow marketers or entrepreneurs. And I'm just so I feel so unleashed because of it. And I don't think people realize like those people are to me the model of idea development because they observe the world, they sense the world, they have a good and sharpened intake system. And a lot of us don't because we're just stuck in our routines. We don't pick our heads up, we don't take our questions and frustrations seriously enough. We don't pull any of the threads that are presented to us, let alone, notice them in many cases. So I think we all need to be more sensitive. And I don't mean you see a dead flower and cry. That's not what I mean by sensitive. I mean, you are using your senses to observe the world and how you feel about it.
Hmm.
And so then you just document all that stuff, right? You don't judge it, you just put it into place. And comedians are world class at that, as are lots of authors and speakers and other types of creatives too. And then they're constantly saying to the world, sometimes overtly, sometimes it's just implied, they're like, is this anything? I don't know. Here's the joke. Oh, they didn't laugh. I didn't feel good doing that. I didn't have a transition there. They're always working and working and working their thinking and ideas and articulation until it is undeniable. And what we do in the business world is we settle. And this happens in speaking. People go, I'm good enough. I can wing it. I've wung it for years. And I'm like, an 80% speech, my friend, that's a 20% business asset because somebody else is walking onto the stage with 100% speech and they're going to eat your lunch, right? Like it's just so bonkers to me that we're like, I want to be world class at this thing. Podcasting is a good example. So I'm going to learn from the folks who only recently adopted that, other business leaders, instead of the best in the business of podcasting or the best in the business of idea development or whatever, building material, building IP, having an act on stage. And so, I learned from that world. And so for me, the way I'm using this tool of AI is to buttress my thinking the same way that me having access to a comedy club down the street, but for business thinkers, would buttress my thinking or challenge my thinking, right? It's I don't have that luxury. So I'm going to try to create a proximity or, a distant echo even of that. And that's been brilliant. That's been working for me. Where I'm really worried, Carl, is I see a lot of people going, I don't like the messy feel of writing or creating or thinking. I'll outsource the mess to a tool and I'll be in cleanup mode. And that's the mistake because in the mess, you find your best. In the mess, you're like, that's how I'm trying to say it, not that. Oh, wow, that idea popped to mind and that's super useful for a future piece or for this one. Oh, a story would be great here. Now I'm thinking of that observation I made and I want to actually produce this story as an opener for this piece. Like every single person, no matter how successful creatively they are, goes through a messy period of making their work great. And that's what makes it great. And so we're outsourcing the part that feels bad. I get that to a tool, to AI. But in fact, you going through it matters more than you doing the cleanup. I would actually ask that you allow AI to clean up your mess a little bit if you can go through the mess yourself. And then you put the finishing touches on it once and for all, right? So we're outsourcing the mess, which is outsourcing our best, our thinking, our breakthroughs, our further ideas we could pursue later. That to me is where I hear most people talk about using AI. And I'm just so uninterested in doing that because I'm just so uninterested in creating mediocrity, but faster.
Yes, yes. Oh, I love that. And I think one of the things to me is using AI. I've been trying to do this more, upload transcripts from my calls. And like, okay, where did I fall flat here?
Yeah.
What else could I have asked? And that has been a game changer. It's helped me with my sales calls. It's helped me with, my interviews. And I find that it's just so fascinating to be able to have AI. And I think what's important, what you're saying is you create it in a way where it's looking for those things for you to improve versus validating what you want to hear.
Yeah, precisely. There's a metaphor that I've come up with to describe this moment in time we're in with AI. And I do think it'll change the way any technologies rise, kind of like the technology itself takes center stage, but then it just falls back into the nooks and crannies. It just absorbs into, right now we're talking about AI as a technology. Eventually we'll be talking about a tactic, a tool, software tool or whatever with AI baked in. So it's kind of a weird moment we're in where we're talking about the tech, which is rare. You don't talk about the code that your website is running on. You talk about, oh, I like using Squarespace or whatever. You don't talk about the tech in your car. You just drive the car. So we're in a little bit of a weird moment. But to describe this moment, here's a metaphor involving a car. So imagine you have built and invented generative AI. Let's be specific here because that's different than other types of AI. Generative AI, you've built that. It's a car. And you drive up to this field of business leaders and marketers playing outside. And you're like, behold, I've invented the car. And they rush up and they're like, you're a genius. You're like, thank you so much. And they're like, this is amazing and innovative. And you're like, yes, it is indeed. Thank you. And then they go, this has flashlights on it. And you're like, what? And then the marketers go screaming around the world, declaring that you self-lighting everything is dead and you should use the flashlights attached to this car. And you just start rubbing your temples as the inventor. And you're like, yeah, I guess the car has some lights on it, but it's a car. Can we focus on the very many car-like things that it can do? Because that's way more powerful. So this to me describes how most people in business use generative AI to create content, to generate things. And I'm like, that is the most rinky-dink use case of a tool that could be very powerful for you if you understood it to be the car that it is, right? And that's the era I want to be in. And we're not there yet. I think we're getting there where people realize like me automating my LinkedIn comments and producing mediocrity at scale on my blog is serving nobody. Me generating things with AI is a toy and a stunt and it's gross or it's bland and that's serving nobody on the receiving end. And I think folks are waking up to that reality. And then we can go back to saying, well, how else might we use these tools, if at all? Because they are just tools and there's other better use cases because a car isn't a flashlight. So use it as a car.
Yes. Yes. I love it. I know we're getting to the top of the hour here, and I want to do our 5 minute system segment. Where can people go to find out more about you and connect with you?
They can find me at jacunzo.com. All of my thinking, my newsletter, my podcast, my public speaking accelerator, and my services are at jacunzo.com. I'm pretty free in giving away everything I work on and think and do. And so if you go to the top of that page, there's a big newsletter button. That's the best place to keep in touch with me.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.